When it comes to quality sleep, Ashley has you covered with top mattress brands at winning prices and with special financing options available. You can snooze now and pay later. Plus, your mattress purchase helps give the gift of better sleep to children in need and U.S. Special Operations Forces. Visit your local Ashley store or shop online today and make every snooze count. Financing is subject to credit approval. See store or ashley.com for details.
Dreaming of overseas adventures or connecting more deeply with family from afar? Rosetta Stone bridges the language gap.
I've tried others, but Rosetta Stone's immersive lessons and voice feedback technology are game changers.
Dive into 25 languages by learning intuitively, just like when you were a kid. And here's the holiday sparkle. Grab a lifetime membership now and save 50%. Gift yourself the world. Head to rosettastone.com now and save 50%.
Welcome to True Crime Garage. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Nick, and with me as always is a man that sings the songs that make John Mayer's panties drop. He is the captain.
Thank you. It's good to be seen, and it's good to see you. Thanks for listening, and thanks for telling a friend.
Today we are drinking Fat Tire Belgian White Ale by New Belgium Brewing Company, garage grade 3 3/4 bottle caps out of 5. Fat Tire Belgian White Ale is a wit beer. You know, Captain, we've been looking to pick something that's a little more readily available, so many of the beers on True Crime Garage are only available in certain locales. I'm not saying that you can get this one everywhere, but this is a great beer to try, and you should be able to find it with just a little beer sleuthing.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite go-to beers.
5.2% ABV, and you can certainly taste the hints of orange and coriander. And this great beer was brought to us by these fine folks right here. First up, we have Alessandra in the Bronx.
And her name was Alessandra.
Next, we have Brandy in Auburn, California. And heading back to the East Coast, we say thank you to Jesse and Nikki in Stoughton, Massachusetts.
And from the Sunshine State, we have Ann from Palm Harbor, Florida.
And we want to send a shout out to Christopher from Marysville, California. Captain Christopher had a lot of nice things to say. Lots of compliments about the old garage music.
Well, don't thank me, thank the alcohol.
And last but not least, we want to give a shout out to Bryce in Pullman, Washington. So thank you to everybody for filling up the fridge for this week's show. If you want to help us out with next week's show, go to truecrimegarage.com and click on the donate button.
We have a few We Like Your Jib shirts left. If you want to check those out, go to truecrimegarage.com and click on the store page.
All right, Captain, that's enough of the business. Everybody gather around, grab a chair, grab a beer. Let's talk some true crime. Wednesday, January 4th, 1984, Aurora, Colorado. In the middle of the night, someone managed to enter the home of James and Kimberly Hobbinschild, a young married couple. They were both asleep when a homicidal maniac crept into their bedroom. The intruder is dressed in dark clothing. There are no lights on in their bedroom and no light coming from the hallway. As he entered the room, he could feel his pulse start to speed up, the adrenaline in him escalating. It was almost as if he could feel the blood flowing from his chest to his arms and legs, and then down to his feet and hands. His breathing became louder with each step as he slowly stepped 1 foot at a time until he was at the side of James and Kimberly's bed. He has been thinking about this for a long time, and now the time has finally come. He was prepared and ready for what was about to happen, but the married couple sleeping in the bed were not. The intruder looked down at the sleeping man, James's head resting on a pillow. The intruder, with his weapon heavy in his right hand, slowly raised the weapon high above his head. And as fast as he could, with as much might as he could muster, he brought his fist down, smashing the weapon into the center of James's skull. James is not moving, but the force of the object hitting the man created an earthquake effect on the bed, and the tremors awakened Kimberly. As she lifts her head from her slumber, she opens her eyes. The intruder bends over, placing one hand on the bed to steady himself, and again he lifts the heavy weapon high above his head, and as fast as he could, before Kimberly could turn and look at him, he smashes in her head with some kind of heavy object, knocking her unconscious. Both James and Kimberly were hit multiple times before the intruder left their home. Somehow, they both survived. James and Kimberly suffered terrible head injuries due to this attack. Neither could offer much of an explanation of who could have done this to them or why. But what we do know is, sometime in the middle of the night on January 4th, 1984, the terror had just begun. In the fall of 1983, 50-year-old Patricia Smith from Nebraska, she moved to Green Mountain Village townhomes located in Lakewood, Colorado. She was helping out her daughter. Patricia's daughter, Sherry Litton, was only 29 years old. Sherry was recently divorced and had moved with her 2 children from rural Oshkosh, Nebraska to Lakewood as well. Patricia was a loving mother and grandmother, and moving in with them to help them out, to help them adjust from the divorce and being relocated over 3 hours away to Lakewood. Patricia, even though she was moving in with her daughter, she was happily married. Her husband, Oliver, had a government job in the state of Nebraska and would have to remain there. Oliver would often make the long drive to visit his wife, daughter, and grandkids on most of the weekends. Patricia, her daughter Sherry, and the grandkids, this is 6-year-old Amber and 4-year-old Joe, they rented a townhome at 12610 West Bayard Avenue in Lakewood. Lakewood is just a short drive about 8 miles southwest of Denver, Colorado.
And Sherry considered her mother, Patricia, to be her best friend.
Yeah, Patricia was doing her best to brighten the lives of her family members during this very tough time for them. And this, to me, Captain, I think this wasn't going to be a short-term arrangement. Mm-hmm. Patricia was going to stay there as long as it took to get them settled in, but it actually sounds to me, Captain, like the plan may have been for Patricia's husband, Oliver, to eventually move out to Colorado to join the rest of the family.
Right, so they could be closer to their grandkids.
Yeah, this would be either after his contract was up with his government state job or maybe upon retirement. The two had a farm. Patricia and her husband had a farm out in Nebraska, so obviously this would require selling the farm as well, but Patricia started up her own business after having moved to Lakewood, Colorado. She had a home interior design business. The family had established a daily routine for the school and work days. The two ladies would get the kids ready in the morning and get in Patricia's car and leave the house each morning. They would first take Amber to school for kindergarten, then take Joe to church. This is where he attended a daycare center that was set up at the church.
Right.
And then they would continue on, and Patricia would drop her daughter Sherry off at a bus station on 6th Avenue. Sherry used public transportation to get to and from her job. Patricia would continue on and go to work. In the evening, when both ladies were done working for the day, Patricia would then meet Sherry at the bus station, and then they would go get the kids. So pretty much the evening routine was the reverse order of the morning routine.
Yeah, let's talk about Tuesday, January 10th, 1984.
Yeah, because that evening didn't work out as usual. You know, Sherry, the daughter, she arrived, her bus arrived at the station, dropped her off. But her mother, who was always there waiting to pick her up, she was not there on this day. Her mother and the car were nowhere in sight.
Right.
Sherry waited around for a bit and then started to get nervous. No matter where her mother was, Sherry still needed to get her kids to go pick up her kids. So she used the payphone and she started making phone calls. She tried to call the townhome where they lived and there was no answer. After several tries to the townhome, she then called a friend. The friend took her daughter from the school to the daycare. She called her cousin, and her cousin picked her up at the bus station. And from there, they went to pick up the children from the daycare center, and they drove back to their townhome. Well, when they arrived at the scene, in front of the house immediately, the scene felt strange to Sherry. Keep in mind, by now, it's dark out, and it's evening time. The first thing that Sherry noticed was her mother's car was parked in the driveway. It was parked out in front of the townhome.
Yeah.
Now, there were no outside lights on. So, you know how when there's no lights on, if there are any lights on inside the home, if there's no lights outside, but there's lights inside the home, you can pretty much see everything, right away.
Yeah.
Well, Sherry could see lights changing color and flickering coming from the upstairs bedroom window.
Yeah, and most people, like, once it starts getting dark, they turn on the outside lights, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like to keep everything dark and wear night vision goggles. I feel like it gives me the advantage.
Well, the lights that were flickering, they're coming from Sherry's mother's bedroom window.
Okay.
So other than the odd thing of no lights, it appears Sherry's mother, Patricia, was at the home.
Now, when you say flickering, I mean, is this like turning on and off or
no,
just like a flicker?
And I'm glad you asked that. The TV is on in the upstairs, one of the upstairs rooms. And so when you see the lights changing and flickering, it's just the TV.
Yeah, that's always a kind of a creepy look.
Mm-hmm. By this time, it's about a little after 6:15 p.m. Of course, the alarming thing here, Captain, is if Patricia was already at the home by this time, why had she not picked up her daughter from the bus, or at the very least picked up the phone when her daughter had tried calling her several times?
Yeah.
Sherry and the kids got out of the car and they walked to the front door. The door was locked. Sherry started to get her keys out. The kids stepped in front of her, both wanting to be the first to get inside out of the cold Colorado winter evening. Sherry unlocked the door, and Amber, her daughter, pushed past her and little Joe and ran inside. Unfortunately, little Amber was the first to find her grandmother on the floor, and an image, in her own words, that she said would never leave her mind. 50-year-old Patricia was lying on the floor near a sofa just about 4 feet from the front door. She was lying on top of a Winnie the Pooh comforter. The comforter was slightly folded so that part of it covered Patricia's head. Her hands and arms were crossed over her chest. Even to little Amber's untrained eye, it was clear that her grandmother had been killed and posed as if she were lying in a casket. Left near the front door, right where the next person to come in the home would immediately find her. Patricia's jeans were pulled down nearly to her ankles. Her boots were still on, and she was wearing a sweater. There was a large amount of blood on Patricia's face and around her head. Someone had left a hammer lying on the floor next to her. Sherry immediately gathered the children and took them next door to the neighbor's home. The neighbor man ran back to the townhome and saw Patricia's dead body. And upon this, he returned to his home to call 911. The police were quick to respond. The family remained at the neighbor's home while the police searched the crime scene for clues. I'm guessing with a killer on the loose and a murder scene, they may have gone to stay with other family members. You know, they had in the Denver area. The homicide investigation was pretty thorough. They quickly determined that Patricia had been raped during the attack. There was no sign of forced entry into the home, and they figured out that she had been killed between the hours of 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. However, the initial report was that she had been killed between the hours of 3 p.m. and 5 p.m.
Well, and also this is 84, so a lot of people are not locking their doors, especially during the day. Maybe more people would lock their doors at night, but it was less likely or more likely that people would have unlocked doors back in 84 than now.
So let's talk about real quick the no sign of forced entry as you're getting towards there. A couple scenarios. There are two scenarios to talk about here. Patricia was on her lunch break, okay? Yeah. And this is what the police were able to determine. That she had gone to a Wendy's restaurant to pick up lunch for herself. Mm-hmm. She had returned home and she was attacked as she opened her front door. This was the police theory. The problem with this police theory is there's evidence to suggest that Patricia was actually home for some time before the attack took place.
Right.
First of all, remember we talked about the TV being on upstairs. Her body was found near the front door on the main level of the townhome.
All right, so she gets her Wendy's. She goes home. She's going to maybe watch a little daytime TV while she eats her lunch, and then knock on the door. She answers the door. The attack happens there.
Well, right, and that's what I'm pointing out here. At the very least, she couldn't have been attacked as she was opening the door because she had to have enough time to get in the home, go upstairs, turn on the TV at the very least.
Yeah, and if she had food and she was attacked when she's going in, wouldn't there be food everywhere?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And you hint to something there very important because the family had their own theory. The family suggested that Patricia, who had grown up and recently lived in a small town before moving to the larger city of Lakewood, they said they think that the killer knocked on the door thinking Patricia was just a trusting person and probably would have not have hesitated to open the door, letting the killer in, and he attacked her immediately upon her opening the door.
Again, right, and again, this would not be uncommon for 1984. Right. I don't think it would be that uncommon for today. You know, you're at home during the day, somebody knocks on your door. There's so many of these solicitors. Mm-hmm. How many people are opening up the door for just whoever, you know?
I actually have a problem with both the initial police theory and the family's theory.
Okay.
And like I said, the TV being on points to me that she probably was not attacked as soon as she had opened the front door. The problem I have with her
when she's going inside the
when
house.
she's going into the home. Uh-huh. And here's why. So the police later find a receipt for the Wendy's food that she picked up upstairs. So we know she went there. This wasn't a TV that was left on from the morning time. This was a TV that was turned on unless the killer for some reason decided to take the receipt to her fast food upstairs and put it in her bedroom. The food, I believe, was found up there as well. It sounds to me, I don't know, it sounds to me like she didn't sit down and consume much of this meal before she was interrupted.
Right.
Here's the thing that makes me believe that she did not answer the door. And this makes the no sign of forced entry very tricky because we're saying she may not have been attacked upon returning home and she herself didn't open the door. Patricia wore a wig. The wig was found upstairs. And, I don't want to receive any crappy email for this, but here's my guess. Okay.
Send Nick crappy emails.
Here's my guess. If I wore a wig, somebody knocks on my door, I'm going to put on my wig before I go answer the door. Does that sound like a fair statement?
I thought you did wear a wig.
You should see these locks, man.
This is my real hair.
Not my real color, Madison Reed. Thank you. No, but that's just a guess. I'm just guessing there. Maybe that's not true 100% of the time, all of the time. But I'm going off the assumption that if I were wearing a wig, somebody knocks on the door, I would probably put the wig on before going downstairs to open up the door.
All right. So your theory is that she gets food, she goes inside the house, she goes upstairs to watch TV while she's going to eat her lunch, and the intruder comes in. The door's unlocked. Yeah, that makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, and
like I said, it's just the idea that sometimes when break-ins happen and they go, there's no sign of forced entry. Sometimes people just don't lock the door. It happens.
Well, and I also want to talk about real quick, Captain, why the
Well, real quick though.
Sorry,
but to me, this points as an individual. If she didn't consume much of her meal, that this is not just some random attack where he just picked this house for no reason, or he was just riding by on his bike and sees this lady in the window watching TV. I think this was probably somebody that saw her getting the food, fancied her on some level, and then followed her back to her place, and probably studied the scene a little bit, just kind of figure out, is she by herself? Are there other people in the house?
Right.
And I think they kind of got the feeling, the attacker had this, the feeling that, no, it's just her, and then he just went in.
Well, the other thing too is if you're watching from the outside, depending on how light it was out that day, you may be able to observe the townhome and see that from the windows, even if the shades are closed, that there's likely no lights on in the home.
Right.
And if she returns home and you're watching her, as you said, and you see, boom, a light turn on as soon as she walks in the front door, boom, a light turn on in the upstairs bedroom, one might assume she's the only person in the home, that there was nobody there before she returned. The other evidence, Captain, the autopsy showed that the cause of death was several very hard and violent hits to her head. This, of course, consistent with the hammer that was found lying next to her as the most likely murder weapon. Whoever killed the woman had removed 2 diamond rings from her fingers and removed a gold necklace that was around her neck. Nothing else was stolen from the home. In fact, the killer didn't even check the rest of the home, this is according to the police, to see if there were other valuables that he could take. Evidence of a sexual assault was collected from the body. One thing that her daughter, Sherry, would point out in a later interview was that there were no defensive wounds on Patricia's hands and arms. This suggesting that she was knocked out by one or more blows to the head before the sexual assault took place.
Let's get back to the case of the Aurora Hammer Slayer after this quick beer break.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you look forward to the holidays? Maybe you struggle with seasonal blues. This time of year can be a lot, and it's natural to feel some sadness or even anxiety about it. But adding something new and positive to your life can counteract some of those feelings. Therapy can be a bright spot, something to look forward to make you feel grounded, and to give you the tools to manage everything going on. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/garage today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, case.Beer.com/garage.
Dreaming of overseas adventures or connecting more deeply with family from afar? Rosetta Stone bridges the language gap.
I've tried others, but Rosetta Stone's immersive lessons and voice feedback technology are game changers.
Dive into 25 languages by learning intuitively, just like when you were a kid. And here's the holiday sparkle. Grab a lifetime membership now and save 50%. Gift yourself the world. Head to rosettastone.com now and save 50%.
Angie's List is now Angie, and we've heard a lot of theories about why.
I thought it was an eco move. Fewer words, less paper.
No, it was so you could say it faster.
No, it's to be more iconic.
Must be a tech thing.
But those aren't quite right. It's because now you can compare upfront prices, book a service instantly, and even get your project handled from start to finish.
Sounds easy.
It is, and it makes us so much more than just a list. Get started at Angie.com. That's ANGI, or download the app today.
All right, we're back. Cheers, mates.
Cheers, Captain.
Stay safe out there. It's all snowy where we're at, so hopefully it's warmer wherever you are.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so in our timeline of the Hammer Slayer, we have the first attack, and that is of the couple.
Yeah, so that is James and Kimberly Hobbinschild that were attacked in the middle of the night inside their home on January 4th, 1984.
But they survived.
Yes.
And then we have the second attack, which is going to be of Patricia Smith, and she, unfortunately, did not survive.
Correct. Later that same day, January 10th, by now it's evening time. The attack and murder of Patricia Smith took place in Lakewood. Now, I know this is the same day, but this next part of the story is going to take us back to Aurora, Colorado. Remember from the first trailer, the first attack took place in the middle of the night in Aurora. So Aurora is just about 15 miles from Lakewood, give or take, depending on how far west in Lakewood you are and how far east you would be in Aurora. I don't have an address for Donna Dixon, so we will just have to use the 15-mile distance as something to keep in mind. In Aurora, 28-year-old flight attendant Donna Dixon, who worked for Frontier Airlines, she is driving home. She pulled into her driveway and parked her car in her garage. As she got out of her car, she was attacked. She was struck in the head. Something very hard smashed into her left temple. She dropped to the ground. Her attacker pulled and stripped her clothes off of her. Donna was sexually assaulted on the concrete garage floor. After the attacker fled the scene, Donna Dixon was left bloodied, very badly beaten, and unconscious. Her attacker had left her there to bleed out or to succumb to her head injuries and die there on the cold concrete floor. Eventually, Donna and the bloody scene were discovered. A call was placed for an ambulance to transport her to the nearest hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Donna was in a coma, but somehow she survived the brutal assault. But because of the severity of her injuries, Donna spent weeks relearning how to talk, which was important here, Captain, because the police were hoping that she could tell them who had attacked her.
Right.
Later, when Donna Dixon would describe the attack, she says that the attacker bashed in her head with a sledgehammer and beat her head against the wheel well. Another curious thing, though, is that same article, that same news article, where the crime reporter had asked Donna to describe the attack and give her insights into the case, there's a troubling phrase in there where it is stated Donna's attacker or attackers had used a sledgehammer to attack her.
And why is that a troubling phrase?
Well, it's not so much that in particular is super troubling. It's that a lot of people over the years have looked at now we've discussed three separate attacks, and a lot of people have looked through the details of those attacks to determine if in fact they are all connected,
right?
If they were all committed by the same perpetrator. So some people have pointed out through the years that, well, while a hammer, what we would believe to be a traditional hammer, was left next to the body of Patricia Smith. And then we have this next account, the third attack, where we have the victim describing a sledgehammer. And I think there's a couple things there to consider. First of all, if a traditional hammer was used to kill Patricia Smith and was left at the scene,
right,
well, then the attacker just hours later would not have that same weapon to use on his next victim.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where she says the word sledgehammer, I don't think we're looking at or thinking about the same thing that you and I would consider a traditional sledgehammer with the long handle. I'm thinking that we're probably talking about something that is just...
right, it's still a short hammer.
Correct.
You can have a short hammer, sledgehammer. I mean, I watched Property Brothers before.
But here's one thing that I want to point out to the listeners. When thinking about if these attacks are connected and if, in fact, the details of these different attacks could lead one to believe that or take you away from believing that, with Donna Dixon in that news article where she gives this account years later of how the attack went down, she is giving you information that was provided to her by the police. Okay, where she says that she was hit in the head with the sledgehammer and pulled to the ground, and then her head was bashed against the wheel well. This information didn't come from her witnessing this attack. She actually had no memory of the attack at all, other than getting out of her car. Basically, for Donna Dixon, she got out of her car and then she woke up many days later in the hospital.
Right.
And that's as far as she remembers. And I know me, and I'm sure a lot of people out there are the same way. That would have happened to me. The first thing I'm asking the police is, one, who did this? Why did they do this? And describe the attack to me as the evidence points out to you, because I want to know what happened to me.
Right. It's probably a crazy fan that you made mad. That's probably what would happen.
Well, and I'm sure that she's able to give this account because the police are relaying what they can see from evidence to tell her, hey, you were attacked immediately as soon as you got out of your car.
Right.
You were attacked in your garage, and we can tell by blood that you left on the wheel well that your head struck that wheel well at least once, if not multiple times.
Well, I mean, I guess the bright side of this is that she does not remember the attack and that she doesn't have those memories that would haunt her.
Right. Right. And it was a long recovery, but she would make a full recovery and go on to live a normal life, not affected by those injuries many years later. Now, one question that has come up time and time again regarding this case, regarding the Hammer Slayer case, is people have always been curious why the police would move the reported time of death regarding Patricia Smith. Remember, early on, it was reported that she was killed sometime between 3 and 5 p.m., but then later reported that she was actually killed between 1 and 3 p.m. Now, the police, the reason why this remains a question, Captain, is the police offer no information or no insight as to why they changed that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
I think here, if we look at the events of that day, and if we look into the lives of the victims involved, that we can probably piece together why they made that change, make some inferences here. And what I think I would point out is, what do we know about Patricia Smith? Well, we know that she is living at that townhome with the sole purpose of helping her daughter and her grandkids. We talked about their daily routine during the work week. Well, their daily routine was to get up, drop off the kids, and then drop off her daughter at the bus station for her to go off to work. So what inference can we make from that is that their work day, Patricia Smith's workday and her daughter Sherry's workday, is based more off of the kids' schedule, what time they need to arrive to school and what time they need to be picked up after school.
Yeah.
So we know that her body was discovered around 6:15 p.m. that night. My guess is that around 3 p.m. was the first time that she was known to be missing. She was not where she was supposed to be. Meaning she had not picked up her daughter. She wasn't waiting at the bus station. Phone calls are made to the townhome where we know she's ultimately found dead later. So one can assume that they came up with the idea of 3 to 5 being that she was unaccounted for starting at 3 p.m. and she's found by 6 p.m. dead. And we know that we had to have some time for the attack to actually occur and for the attacker to flee the scene. So you come up with that 3 to 5 marker, right?
Yeah, I think it makes more sense to take a look at her receipt to see if there's a time on it. That would be the starting point, wouldn't it?
Well, and I think that's where you are exactly right, my friend, because now later they're going to tell you that the attack probably most likely occurred between the hours of 1 p.m. and 3 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, why would that move? We have to, again, look at the victim and what that person was doing that day. And like you said, they found a receipt.
Did it have a timestamp on it?
It would have had a timestamp on it, yes. This information was not released to the public.
You mean the time was not released?
Correct.
Timestamp.
But the inference we can make from what police did release, stating that we believe she returned home on her lunch break, meaning that that timestamp is going to point them more towards a traditional lunch hour time. And then we know that she would have had to have been killed, or most likely would have had to have been killed before 3 p.m. because that's when she is now unaccounted for. So if you take a look at that receipt, as you had pointed out, and the receipt says 12:30, 12:45, 12:50, and we know that she's not accounted for starting at 3 p.m., then it's looking like this attack occurred sometime between the hours of 1 to 3. My guess is that they had not discovered that receipt upon releasing that initial information.
Yeah, possibly. And then, like you said, depending on what that timestamp is, let's say it is 12:30. Then she has this travel time to get back to her house. And again, with the reports, it's stating that, well, she didn't consume much of this food. So unless she was interrupted with a phone call, which we'd have phone records of that, if there wasn't something hindering her or being a hindrance, it's not even the right word.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Let's go with that word. But for whatever reason, she has her food and she didn't eat all the food. So you would assume that the attack happened pretty quickly once she returned home.
Some other things, though, here, Captain, is that after these attacks, they started rounding up construction workers and home builders in the area. And I mean the area of Aurora and Lakewood.
Right.
Apparently, both of these neighborhoods in both of these cities it was a housing boom for both of these cities during this time period of late 83, early 84. So there's a lot of homes being built and a lot of houses going up everywhere.
Yeah, and their thought was the weapon is commonly used tool in construction.
Yes, go ahead.
The tough thing about this tool is it's not. This is also a household object. Most houses have a hammer, and then the question becomes: is this person showing up without a hammer and finding one at the scene, or is he bringing a hammer with him?
Well, you bring up an interesting point, because first off, in the Patricia Smith murder, the hammer was left, meaning that when they state that the hammer was left, that means that they've shown it to the remaining people that lived at that home and said, was this hammer here before this event happened?
Yeah.
And to the accounts they're getting from these people, the family members of Patricia Smith, are no, that was not in this house prior to this attack. Then in the situation with Donna Dixon, I don't think that we have a hammer that was left or a sledgehammer that was left at the scene. There's no report of that. One thing I wondered, though, with them rounding up all of the construction workers and the home builders, and this might sound silly, but sometimes it's these silly little things that can solve a case or at least give you a decent lead.
All right, let's hear your little silly idea.
Okay, so we know that at least one hammer was left at a crime scene on January 10th.
Yeah.
I would be curious to know if there were if they spent time looking at hammer purchases on the 11th or the 10th or the 12th or the 13th. And the only reason why I'm pointing that out is obviously, like you had said, a common tool used by construction workers and home builders is, in fact, a hammer. or, anybody in that is similar trade.
Right.
But my thing is, if the perpetrator at least left one hammer at a crime scene, is there a chance he needs to replace that? I mean, here's what I'm getting at. If you have an area like Lakewood or Aurora, and there's these attacks going on, and it's fairly well known that the weapon used in the murder was a hammer that was left there, and then 2 days later, you and I are at a site, we're working together in some form of, we're craftsmen or we're builders or something of that nature.
Yeah, I'd be the foreman. Yeah.
You would be the boss, and I'd say, hey, foreman, captain.
And I'd say, go fetch me that concrete, you mule.
And I would go, I'll fetch you the concrete, but do you have a hammer I can borrow? And you'd go, Nick, I'm tired of you showing up without your tools.
All right, let me try it. Nick, I'm tired of you showing up here. You got a future. You got some real skills, natural gifted, but you can't show up empty-handed, my friend. You need to show up with your tools.
I'm just getting at, would it be a little suspicious if all of a sudden one of these guys is showing up without that very common tool?
Yeah, but look, let's say there's 100 construction sites, that probably happens every day.
It might happen every day, but where I'm going is to the hardware stores and looking to see, hey, has anybody purchased hammers in the past 24, 48, 72 hours?
I don't think that your idea is that silly, but I think you would want to take it one step further. If there is some kind of evidence based on the autopsy that it was a different kind of hammer, not the traditional hammer, that maybe you should look into, was there multiple purchases? Was there a purchase of the traditional hammer and then one of the smaller sledgehammer? I think if you could find that, because those were the same day, those purchases might have been made at the same time. Mm-hmm. But it's also possible that whoever this nut job is going around attacking people with a hammer is, let's say he's living with his mom. His father has passed away, but his father was into construction. Mm-hmm. These could be tools that, that would be another question that was not reported. Was the hammer that was left, what kind of condition was this in? Was this a 10-year-old hammer?
Yeah. Did it look purchased recently? Or that's a good insight there.
Well, and the reason why I wonder that is because I personally probably own, 5-6 different hammers.
Right. I would say I own it minimum 3, maybe 4 or 5.
And and there's they all vary in age,
mm-hmm.
And I have a couple older hammers that I probably should throw away, but, sentimental value, grandfather's hammer or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. That's one thing I would like to know. Is this a new hammer? And then you're, again, they probably did this if it was a new hammer. If it was a new hammer, they probably were checking local hardware stores.
Right. And like I said, though, I also think it would be worth checking in case this person needed to replace it immediately for their occupation, if they believe that. Now, the other thing, though, is we got to keep in mind, we've not even determined that these 3 attacks are actually connected yet. It's looking that way. There are similarities that would have you believe. There's no sign of forced entry into Patricia Smith's home. There's no sign of forced entry into the Hobbins child's home.
Right.
Then we have Donna Dixon, who's attacked outside of her home in her garage. But there was a 4th attack, and I want to start off by saying this. When you do a very simple Google search of this case, and you can look it up under several different tags.
Yeah, that was the hardest thing about this case.
Yeah, you could look it up under the title we chose, the Aurora Hammer Slayer. I've also seen it called Colorado Hammerman, or any of the many, many different tags given to these cold cases. You will get about 1 of 3 different articles reporting the 4th attack. So what we have done for this portion is sort of compiled those 3 more popular articles regarding the 4th attack to tell you the details of that 4th attack, and in relation to the next part of our cold case investigation, because there are plenty of questions in this case. But I think let's go through this fourth attack first and get to those questions after. But before we do the fourth attack, we have to take you back a bit to tell you about a man named Bruce Bennett. Bruce married his high school sweetheart, Deborah. They were young. They were actually just out of high school when they got married. After they married, Bruce joined the Navy. He was there. He served 4 years stationed at Pearl Harbor from 1976 to 1980. Bruce was a sonar analyst. After the Navy, Bruce was enrolled in college, and he was trained as an air traffic controller. Bruce's family owned a family-run furniture store, and Bruce was working there. However, he was excited for a possible future career as an air traffic controller. Now, Bruce Bennett and his wife, Deborah Bennett, they both enjoyed living what others would later describe as a quiet life. The two, along with their small children, we have 7-year-old Melissa and 3-year-old Vanessa. They had moved to a nice home in the 16300 block of East Center Drive in Aurora, Colorado. Bruce and Deborah are pretty young themselves. Bruce is 27 and his wife is 26.
Mm-hmm.
They moved there over the course of the long Thanksgiving holiday weekend in 1983. Where we left off in our case so far is January 10th, 1984. Well, we're going to move forward to January 15th, 1984. This is a Sunday. Melissa, the Bennett's 7-year-old daughter, she's going to be turning 8 years old later in the week. So the Bennetts are going to celebrate Melissa's birthday on that Sunday. So they had some other family members over that day to join in the celebration. So, sometime on Sunday evening, things are winding down. People have to work in the morning, so their guests are starting to leave. I can't say for certain here what time the last guest or guest left, but I do have something in my notes here suggesting that the last guests were leaving around 9 o'clock, maybe as early as 9 o'clock or as late as 10 p.m. Bruce and Deborah, they cleaned up the party and put the children to bed. Sometime during the night, a cat burglar entered the home, armed with a knife and a hammer.
Trying to steal cats.
A noise must have awoken Bruce, and upon which he went to investigate the noise, Bruce encountered the intruder on the stairs to the home, and immediately a fight ensued.
Yeah.
From the way it looks, this was quite the fight. We have an intruder here with a weapon and Bruce presumably unarmed. Regardless of how unfair this fight is, this would be... What I can say is Bruce did the best he could to protect his family.
Well, you said the intruder had a hammer and a knife?
Correct.
Yeah.
Bruce did the best he could to protect his family. He had been slashed. He was slashed several times in this attack. He was hit over the head with the hammer. But yet, even though he had all these injuries, he repeatedly crawled up the stairs, covered in blood, trying to save and protect his family. However, he was unsuccessful. The intruder went to the master bedroom and he pummeled and sexually assaulted the 26-year-old Deborah, leaving her head bashed in. Next, he walked the hall to 7-year-old Melissa's room, where he did the same, and then he walked into the youngest girl's room, Vanessa, and repeatedly hit her in the head and face with a blunt object, presumably a hammer.
And fast forward ahead a little bit to January 16th at 10 a.m. It's going to be the discovery of the bodies.
Yeah, and this happens because Bruce has not shown up for work yet. And as we said, it's a family-owned business, so... One of the people that works there, not sure maybe if she's the owner of the company, but this is Bruce's mother, Constance. And like others, I'm sure, at the store, was just at the Bennett residence the day before for the birthday party. And it's not like Bruce to miss work, certainly without notifying someone. So Constance tries calling the house several times, and with no luck, she decides to go to the Bennett house. Later, she would say that she was afraid of something like CO poisoning.
Right.
Yeah, so that maybe the whole family had fallen asleep for forever because of CO poisoning. So she makes the drive, And Bruce's body was discovered that morning by his own mother, Constance Bennett, who immediately called police. Now, the Bennett house was a horrible scene, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And these attacks that took place, I mean, the house and the rooms were so bloody and the victims so badly beaten. And Constance, having arrived at a home to see the unimaginable, well, she failed to notice something very important. That out of all the death that had taken place in those dark early morning hours, death had missed the little 3-year-old girl, Vanessa.
Yeah.
Bennett didn't know that Vanessa had survived the attack until a paramedic rushed out of the house, cradling the battered little girl in his arms. She was in very bad shape, but she was rushed off to the hospital. The other 3 family members of the Bennett family, Bruce, Deborah, and Melissa, sadly were killed that night and pronounced dead at the crime scene. Bruce was found on the stairs, Deborah in her bedroom, and Melissa in her bedroom. Melissa, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, it's just so sad. I mean, one, you applaud Bruce for trying, to save his family and his little girls. And then I think just sometimes when it's when there are kids involved in an attack like this, it just seems like, like this one just feels different than the other attacks.
Well, it's really a lot to take in all at once there. And
but then now we have this, very young victim that's alive that maybe they could give us some information.
Yes, and that's what we're hoping. Vanessa had skull fractures to both sides of her head. Her jaw was shattered, which ended up sending jagged bones into her windpipe. And I don't say that to paint a horrible picture for you. I only say that to try to
late.
Well, I only say that to try to describe how
vicious it was.
Yeah.
Whoever did this has to be a fucking monster.
Well, and the thing here is, Captain, I point that out because I believe that whoever did this didn't know that the girl was still alive. I think that she probably looked so bad after he had attacked her that he believed that she was dead.
Right.
A massive investigation had begun, obviously. This produced very little leads. Regarding the house itself, the early reports indicated the following: that there again was no signs of forced entry into the home. There was also no obvious motive for the killings for the police. Nothing was taken from the house except for a knife used to slash Bruce and a purse belonging to Deborah, which was scattered. The contents of the purse were scattered in the front yard outside, and the purse was left in the front yard as well.
And you'd think with all these attacks happening that people would start locking their doors. Not saying that they didn't lock their doors. Just because there's no sign of forced entry, right, doesn't mean that somebody doesn't know how to pick a lock.
Right.
Doesn't know how to get, I could break into a lot of homes and you wouldn't know that I actually broke in there. Like, there wouldn't be any sign of that. I probably shouldn't have said that out loud.
No, you shouldn't have. Regarding Bruce, the early reports stated that he had been cut and slashed numerous times and struck in the head with a hammer. The deputy district attorney had this to say, quote, "It was quite clear he had fought with the intruder. It's apparent he had struggled with his attacker in more than one location and on more than one floor of the house. Yeah. He had numerous." This is where you like. It's sad because you're sad that Bruce didn't survive the attack,
right? But
you're in a way kind of proud of him,
yeah.
Because
you know why? Because fuck the intruder,
Well, and this is from the deputy district attorney's mouth. She says that Bruce had numerous injuries that could have killed him. That's how hard he fought and how badly he was hurt during the course of that fight, and he wouldn't stop fighting.
It's going to sound a little silly, but you get attacked, right? And then it's time to, you're down on the ground. You got to make a decision, right? Are you going to get up, right? You're going to fight. You're going to keep fighting. You have your wife there. You have your children. Mm-hmm. And I bet he pulled one of the Hulk Hogan moves. where he started waving his finger up. Round 2, and yeah, did he stop him? No. But like I said, that intruder, had his hands full. And like you said, it's a weird thing to, I guess, say that you're proud of him, but I don't know what else to call it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It sounds weird to say that, but I mean, there's no other way to put it for me. Okay. So let's talk about this, because I said that we took kind of, 3 newspaper articles of the immediate ones that will pull up when you go to look into this case, and kind of smash them together to present the whole thing to you as far as the 4th attack and the murders of the Bennett family go. And I want to point out a couple things here, because many armchair detectives, many web sleuthers have taken a look at this case over the years and tried to figure out a lot of things about this case regarding the details about, we've always heard the devil's in the details. So that's why we pour through the details and try to see if we can gain anything or learn anything about the potential attacker or attackers that committed these crimes. I want to first address one thing. It has been brought up several times over the years that potentially if all 4 of these attacks are in fact connected, that the killer was escalating. Meaning that he chose to bring a knife and a hammer with him to the 4th attack, where on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, there's no evidence of a knife being present. But later in that story, we hear that the knife was probably taken from the Bennett family home, and then the bloody knife was found out in front of their home, was thrown down near the purse in the front yard.
Yeah.
When we try to figure out this person, this attacker, and if in fact they were escalating, I would suggest maybe not, because it doesn't appear that this attacker brought the knife with him. It appears that he in fact took the knife from the Bennett home and used it during the attack. My guess is that he went looking for the knife, that he had encountered Bruce. He had this fight with Bruce. He probably hit Bruce in the head multiple times with the weapon he brought with him, the hammer. And when Bruce kept getting up, at some point, this attacker believed that his own weapon was failing him. Yeah. And that he went looking for the knife and decided he needed to use a different weapon, a different method to kill the man that's trying to stop him inside the home that he's entered. And we know this because Bruce's throat was slashed. So ultimately, he used a different method to kill Bruce. However, we heard the deputy district attorney stating Bruce had suffered many injuries that would have killed most people.
Yeah.
So where I say that people have questioned, was this attacker, this intruder escalating, I would say no. And for the simple fact that I think that this was an unplanned portion of this guy's attack. We saw the previous scenes where there was no knife used, but he also left all of those victims in a manner which I believe he thought they were all dead when he left there. And I think he broke into the home with the intention of killing who was ever inside and doing whatever he wanted while he was in there. But I don't see escalation here. I think that it's just happenstance that those people survived, and thankfully they survived.
But don't you think that with some of these attacks, it suggests that he would be casing the house or casing whatever situation he's going into?
We talked about that earlier where, you could have watched Patricia Smith's home from the outside, and judging by whether she turned on lights and there were no lights on before, that would indicate that she was in fact alone. But the problem I have with that is, if that were the case, he could essentially do this in each one of these attacks. Donna Dixon was by herself. So maybe he followed her in her car, saw her driving home, decided to start following her, and then he blitz attacked her as soon as she got out of her car. He could have parked near her and just ran up and started attacking her in her garage, knowing that she either was alone, or if there was somebody inside the home, he would have a few minutes to gain control of the situation.
Yeah.
You could have potentially followed Patricia Smith home and figured out if she was in fact home alone or not. These other two cases, the female's not by themselves. You know, if in fact that was his goal, we know that there was rape involved in several of these cases. If you're trying to get a female alone, that was not the case with the Hobbins child attack or the case in the Bennett house. So therefore, that tells me one thing, or one of two things. Either he's casing the houses as you suggested, and maybe whether there's a man present or not does not affect his determination of going into the home.
Right, and that's what my argument would be, is that to me it's a clear sign of escalation if the person cased the house and knew that it wasn't even just two people in the house, but
that there were four.
But there were the four, and that there were children involved, and that, you know, wouldn't that be by definition escalating it?
It would be, but then you have the other situation. Part two of my answer would be maybe he's not watching the houses and does not care who or what is inside.
Yeah,
that he's just going to go in and take over the scene and leave a horrible, horrible, bloody mess when he's done. Let's talk about questions here, because one thing that we've tasked ourselves with this case, because this is a fascinating cold case. And I've come across many common questions that people have come up with within the first few years after these attacks had happened. Now, we said cold case, so you need to keep in mind it's cold for a reason. There were these 4 attacks that may or may not be linked, but there were no more attacks that we can find that were similar that could be linked to this. So the questions that we've tasked ourselves with answering, and we're going to have to do this in the next episode because we're getting a little lengthy here today, but
that's what she said.
the first question is this: it's not clear if all 4 of the January attacks are connected. So we'll try to answer that one tomorrow. Also, because there were no signs of forced entry into the homes, how did the intruder get into the Bennett home or the other homes? Did the killer know his victims? And if not, how did he choose these particular people or houses? Also, what was the motive for these attacks or killings? Why was Patricia killed during the day and the Bennetts killed overnight? And then also, as we had already stated, the killings ended with the Bennett family murders. Why? Did the killer die, or did he just stop killing, or maybe he moved to another state? So we're going to do some additional digging and see if we can answer these questions for you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. And thank you for telling a friend. Until next time, be good, be kind, and don't litter.
You can live out your MasterChef dreams when you find a professional on Angie to tackle your dream kitchen remodel. Connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. Inside to outside, repairs to renovations. Get started on the Angie app or visit Angie.com today. You can do this when you Angie that.